The bitter smell of damp concrete clung heavily to the alleyway as Marcus Blaze Turner moved through the shadows with deliberate caution. His boots barely made a sound on the cracked pavement, every step measured and quiet, as if the darkness itself could swallow him whole. His eyes flicked nervously toward the flickering neon sign overhead, casting sickly yellow light onto the gangly figure leaning against the brick wall, fingers tapping impatiently on the faded surface. Marcus's heart pounded softly in his chest, a mix of dread and resolve swirling inside him. The air was thick with the scent of stale smoke, spilled liquor, and the faint scent of decay. Signatures of a life lived on the edge, one misstep away from disaster. As he approached, the figure straightened, eyes narrowing under a battered baseball cap. "You got the package?" the man whispered, voice rough like gravel, eyes darting nervously at every shadow. Marcus nodded, clutching a small crumpled parcel close to his side. An illicit cargo that could buy him his freedom or land him in deeper trouble. "Yeah, it's clean," Marcus replied softly, voice gravelly with tension. The man's lips curled into a crooked grin, revealing a row of crooked teeth, some missing altogether, like a jagged jaguar's smile. "Good. That's what I needed to hear." Without warning, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper, a silence passing between them with the weight of unspoken threats. Marcus's fingers twitched. He knew this was the moment where trust had already been broken, where betrayal lurked just beneath the surface. "Hold up," Marcus said, voice firm but cautious. "What's this about? You said I'd be straight. Just do the deal and walk away." The man's eyes glinted with something darker, more calculated. "Yeah, about that. Things got messy. Some guys came around and I had no choice. You know how it is. Sometimes loyalty costs more than it's worth." Marcus's jaw tightened, his fists clenched in the shadows. He'd heard enough of these empty words. Justifications for cowardice, for selling out a brother for a handful of cash. His mind flashed back to the nights spent hiding in dingy apartments. The nights when trust was a fragile illusion. Now, standing here in this alley stained with the ghosts of past mistakes, he felt the cold sting of betrayal sharper than ever. The man's smile faded, replaced by a thinly veiled smirk of triumph. "You're a good guy, Marcus. Too bad you're just caught in the crossfire." As the man turned to walk away, Marcus's vision blurred with rage, and a strange calm settled over him. One that whispered that this was not the end, but only the beginning of his reckoning. The city's darkness wrapped around him like a shroud, and he knew, deep down, that once he crossed this line, there was no going back. Every step he took away from the alley was haunted by the weight of what had just transpired. The betrayal, the fragile trust shattered like glass, and the quiet promise that one day he'd make sure that betrayal came at a cost. As he melted into the shadows, Marcus's mind raced with the burning thought. This was the moment he decided to take back his dignity, no matter how brutal the road ahead. Sitting alone on a battered crate beneath flickering neon signs, I let the cold air slice through my cracked leather jacket, the dim glow casting shadows that danced across my tired face. The city's hum was a constant droning reminder of everything I'd lost. My family, torn apart by violence and neglect, their faces flickering in my mind like ghostly images I couldn't quite hold on to. I ran a hand through my unkempt hair, feeling the grit and sweat clinging to my fingertips. A tangible reminder of how far I'd fallen. Addiction, that wicked shadow, still lurked behind my eyelids, whispering promises of escape just one more hit away. Even now. "What's the point?" I muttered softly, voice rough from disuse, as if speaking aloud could somehow drown out the ghosts of my mistakes. My gaze drifted over the cracked pavement, where broken glass and discarded packs told stories of countless nights, chasing fleeting highs, fleeting hope. Every scar on my face, every hollowed-out look in my eyes, was a testament to battles fought in silence, against betrayal, addiction, and the relentless tide of despair. I had once believed in a sliver of hope, a flicker that maybe someday I'd find redemption, break free from this prison of shadows. But the city, its cold, indifferent streets, had a way of chewing you up and spitting you out, leaving behind only fragments of what you once were. I kept my guard up, glance sharp and wary of every movement around me. The alley was thick with silence, broken only by distant sirens and the occasional drip of water echoing from the cracked pipes overhead. A shadow moved, a figure lurking in the corner, eyes glinting like a predator, sizing me up, reminding me that trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. I reached into my pocket, fingers trembling slightly, clutching the small worn photograph of my family I kept hidden, a fleeting reminder of the man I once hoped to be. My jaw clenched tighter as I thought of the betrayal that had brought me here, Victor's treachery, his false promises, the way he handed me over for that damn package, sealing my fate. The bitter taste of revenge was a slow burn in my chest. But tonight I'd be cautious. Every step forward carried the weight of past sins, and I knew I had to stay sharp, because in this city, even salvation came at a price, sometimes paid in blood and broken teeth. As I leaned back against the cold wall, I whispered to no one, "Redemption's a long shot, but if I don't fight for it, I'll just end up another ghost of the streets. Gotta keep my eyes open. Gotta stay alive." The flickering neon was a harsh reminder. Hope was fragile here, easily snuffed out. But I wasn't ready to surrender just yet, not while the shadows still stretched long, and the ghosts of my past still haunted every step I took. In the shadowed silence of the abandoned warehouse, the air thick with dust and the scent of rusted metal, I stepped forward cautiously, my eyes scanning the dim interior as the flickering overhead bulb cast fleeting shadows on the cracked concrete floor. The only sound was the faint scuff of my boots against the uneven ground, echoing in the hollow space where trust was as fragile as the peeling paint on the walls. From the darkness emerged a figure, clad in a battered leather jacket, his face weathered like the city itself, who nodded slowly, a signal of familiarity and caution. I extended my hand, palm slightly sweaty but firm, and he took it, our grips tentative yet deliberate, a silent acknowledgement of the stakes hanging heavy between us. "You got the package?" I asked, voice low, nearly a whisper, as I kept my eyes locked on his. He nodded again, pulling a small satchel from beneath his jacket, the worn leather creaking softly. "Yeah, it's all there," he murmured, eyes darting nervously, as if expecting betrayal at any moment. I reached into my pocket, fingers brushing the cold metal of a switchblade hidden there, just in case, and carefully peeled back the flap of the satchel, revealing the contents. A bundle of carefully wrapped packages, the aroma of illicit substances faint but unmistaken. We both knew this exchange could ignite chaos in a heartbeat. The old man's voice broke the tense silence, cracking with fatigue and wariness. "Remember, no one here is your friend. Be quick. Be clean." My jaw tightened beneath the scarred skin, and I nodded back in silent agreement. As I reached out to take the package, I sensed the weight of betrayal lurking just beneath the surface. Trust was a fragile veneer that could shatter in an instant. I tucked the satchel securely into my jacket, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline surge through my veins, and with a quick, measured nod, I signaled to him that the deal was done. But in the back of my mind, I knew this silence, this secretive bargain was merely another chapter in a long, dangerous story, one where betrayal lurked behind every handshake, and trust was the most costly currency of all. Victor Reyes sauntered up to me at the bustling corner of the street, his slick smile slicing through the crowd like a razor. The sunlight glinted off his polished shoes, contrasting sharply with the weariness etched into his face, a face that knew too many secrets. He leaned in just slightly, voice low but smooth. "This will set us both up, Blaze." His fingers brushed the edge of a small, nondescript package, wrapped tightly in brown paper, the faint scent of stale chemicals emanating from it. I kept my eyes locked on his, cautious yet curious, my instincts prickling beneath the surface of his charm. "Yeah? And what's the catch?" I asked, voice edged with suspicion, my tone steady despite the pounding in my chest. Victor chuckled softly, the curve of his lips never quite reaching his eyes. No catch, just a little trade. Your time, my package. We both walk away. Richer, smarter. His hand extended, offering the parcel as if it carried nothing more dangerous than a loaf of bread. I hesitated, feeling the weight of unspoken threats hanging in the air, the distant hum of cars and voices masking the tension simmering just under the surface. I reached out, fingers brushing the rough paper, sensing the danger concealed within, knowing that accepting this deal might entangle me deeper into a web of lies. I studied his face, the calm veneer masking a predator's patience, recognizing the subtle flicker of greed behind his smile. You sure about this? I pressed, voice low and deliberate. Victor's eyes gleamed with a calculated confidence. Trust me, Blaze. It's good for both of us. I nodded slowly, a quiet acknowledgement that I was about to step further into the darkness, into a game where betrayal was the currency, and every move could be your last. As I took the package, I realized that beneath Victor's smooth exterior lurked a man who knew exactly how to manipulate shadows. And I wondered if I was following a path from which I'd never return. The crowd swirled around us, oblivious to the dangerous dance unfolding in their midst, a silent testament to how easily trust could be exploited in a city built on secrets and lies. Victor's smile stretched wider, the subtle shift in his tone slicing through the tense air like a blade. Hand over the package, and I'll owe you one, he said softly, voice smooth but suffused with an underlying edge of menace. His eyes gleamed with calculated confidence, inviting trust, but warning of danger beneath the surface. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, muscles stiffening as he stared at the slick, unassuming man before him. The facade of charm masking a predator's hunger. The words hung between them, heavy and deliberate, as if Victor was offering a fragile truce in a war neither of them fully understood. Marcus hesitated, mind racing through the implications. This was no ordinary deal, no simple exchange of goods. The air around them grew thick, shadows flickering in the dim alleyway, while the sounds of distant sirens and city life blurred into a dark hum. His fingers tightened on the cold leather of his jacket, knuckles whitening as he listened to Victor's voice again, low and coaxing. You know I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Just trust me on this, Blaze. But trust felt like a fragile thing, brittle and liable to shatter with one wrong move. Marcus's eyes darted to the package briefly, then back to Victor's calculating gaze, sensing the trap, but feeling the weight of his own dependence. On Victor's resources, his protection, and the fragile respect still hanging between them. Every instinct screamed warning. Yet part of him was drawn by the promise of leverage, of control over his own fragile world. The city's shadows seemed to creep closer, whispering secrets in a language only they understood. As Marcus finally clenched his jaw and nodded slowly, he knew that crossing this line would plunge him deeper into an abyss from which there was no return. Yet the lure of revenge, of reclaiming his dignity, pushed him forward. The deal was made, silent, loaded, dangerous. And as Victor's eyes flickered with satisfaction, Marcus felt the cold grip of betrayal tightening around his insides, knowing well that, in this game, trust was just another weapon wielded by the cunning and the ruthless. As Marcus reached out slowly, his fingers trembling just slightly as they closed around the cold, crinkled edges of the package, Victor's expression remained carefully neutral, a mask of calm confidence that masked a sinister undercurrent. The dim alley flickered with the faint glow of a flickering overhead bulb, casting long shadows over their tense confrontation. Marcus's eyes narrowed, sensing that something was off, his instincts prickling with unease. As he hesitated, studying the package as if trying to read its secrets, Victor's lips curled into a slight, almost imperceptible smile. A flash of satisfaction that didn't quite reach his eyes. Then, suddenly, Victor's gaze shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, to a figure lurking a few yards behind Marcus. A man cloaked in dark clothing, his face obscured beneath a hoodie. A flicker of recognition darted through Marcus's mind. The telltale sign of a setup. His heart thudded painfully as he caught the subtle nod Victor gave, a silent signal exchanged with the lurking figure. His stomach clenched as the truth sank in. This wasn't a simple deal, but a trap. Victor's voice, smooth and low, cut through the tense silence. "You really thought I'd give you the full story? You're smarter than that, Blaze." Marcus's eyes widened as he took a cautious step back, clutching the package tighter, his mind racing to piece the puzzle together. The figure behind him stepped forward, a glint of metal catching the scant light. Marcus's pulse hammered in his ears. He realized with cold certainty Victor's calm exterior was a lie, a mask hiding betrayal of the deepest kind. Victor's lips parted in a twisted smile. "Sorry, man, but I had to make sure you'd take the bait. That package? It's not just for you. It's for the cops. And guess what? They've been waiting all along." The shadows behind him converged as the police finally emerged in a rush, guns drawn, shouting commands. Marcus's eyes flicked back to Victor, the smirk frozen on his face, as the realization hit like a punch to the gut. His world spiraled into chaos in an instant. Betrayal had cut deeper than any knife, and now the weight of it pressed down hard, crushing his spirit beneath the cold, merciless truth. Victor's smile was the final dagger. The blaring wail of police sirens echoed through the narrowing alleyways, a piercing reminder that the moment of reckoning had arrived with relentless certainty. Marcus's chest heaved as he was forcefully dragged backward by stern officers, their grips like steel bands tightening with each desperate struggle. His face burned with humiliation. The crowd that had gathered earlier now dispersed in whispers and shock, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe, as they watched the fall of a man once so confident in his shadowy world. His jaw clenched, cheeks flushed with rage and shame, as the cold metal of handcuffs clicked tightly around his wrists, sealing his fate. He cast a furious, betrayed glance toward Victor, standing a few yards away, a sneering smile curling his lips, eyes glittering with satisfaction, and something darker. Calculated survival. "You thought you could play me, huh?" Marcus spat through clenched teeth, voice trembling with fury. "You handed me over for some damn package like I was nothing. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" His voice cracked as adrenaline surged, muscles tense with the raw need to lash out. But the officers yanked him upright, forcing him into submission. The crowd's murmur swelled as voices tried to grasp what had transpired. This was more than a simple arrest. It was betrayal on a brutal scale, a violent rupture of trust that cut through Marcus's soul like a razor. His eyes flickered with a mixture of defiance and despair as he looked again at Victor, whose smile widened, predatory in its calmness. "Go ahead," Victor called out, voice smooth and icy. "Enjoy your time in the cage. You weren't the only one who played this game, but I sure as hell came out on top." The officers yanked him onward, the grip of reality crushing his chest as the chaos faded behind him, leaving only the bitter taste of betrayal and the cold knowledge that Victor's smile, so confident, so unrepentant, had sealed his victory. And in that moment Marcus understood. The shadows that once cloaked him were now closing in, darker and more unforgiving than ever before. Behind bars, I sit huddled in the dim corner of my cell, the cold concrete pressing against my back as shadows dance across the peeling walls. The muffled chaos of the outside world is replaced by a heavy silence that weighs down on me, broken only by the distant clank of metal and the occasional murmur of guards passing by. My mind keeps replaying Victor's smug face, that cruel smile stretching wider as he handed me over, sealing my fate with a nod and a wicked gleam in his eye. I can still feel the ache in my jaw from the days I endured without teeth, the memory of how I made him suffer echoing like a ghost. What he took from me, I'll take back. I grip the cold steel bars, knuckles white, and whisper through clenched teeth, "You think you've won, Victor. You're just digging your own grave." My voice is hoarse but resolute, filled with a simmering fury that refuses to die. I've studied every crack in this prison's facade, every guard's routine, every weak link in the chain that binds me. My plan is already taking shape, an escape driven by a hunger so fierce it borders on madness. I'll find him, I tell myself, eyes narrowing as I close my palm into a fist. Victor Reyes won't walk away from this unscathed. No, he'll regret the day he betrayed me, because betrayal doesn't just stay buried. It festers, waiting for the right moment to explode. I can taste the anticipation, hot, bitter, like ash in my mouth. And I know that I won't rest until I confront him face to face, until I make him pay for every lie, every broken promise, every tooth I lost. The darkness inside me is a living thing now, growing stronger with each heartbeat, whispering that justice isn't enough. Revenge is the only thing that will fill the hollow ache in my chest. And when that moment comes, when I finally break free, Victor won't recognize me. He'll see the man he betrayed, scarred, toothless, and unrelenting. A beast awakened from its slumber, ready to claim what's been stolen, and remind him that, in this world, trust is just another form of weakness. I lean closer to the bars, my eyes gleaming with resolve, voice low and deadly. You made a mistake, Victor. You gave me time to think, to plan. Now, I'm coming for you, and I promise you won't leave this alive or whole. The cell feels tighter, the shadows deeper, but I smile despite myself, because I know that the darkness I've embraced is the only armor I have left, and I'll wear it like a crown when I finally face him. This isn't over, far from it. It's only just begun. In the suffocating silence of his cell, Marcus's mind sketched a detailed blueprint of vengeance, every step meticulously mapped out with cold precision. The dull hum of distant guards and the faint drip of water echoed in his ears as he recalled Victor's silken voice, the subtle smirk that betrayed his confidence, the quick flick of his eyes signaling a secret weakness. You thought you could betray me and walk away clean, Marcus muttered under his breath, voice rough and strained from disuse. His gaze flicked to the rusty bars, tracing the faint cracks that ran like veins across the metal surface. A silent reminder of his own fractured soul. With steady hands, he clenched and unclenched fists, feeling the rough calluses from years of survival, the scars beneath his skin, whispering tales of past betrayals and blood. His mind sharpened, visualizing Victor's routines, the late nights at that sleek downtown bar, the hurried meetings in shadowed parking garages, the moment when complacency would be his undoing. Tonight I'll turn the tables, he said softly, voice trembling with a mixture of anticipation and rage. He knew Victor's patterns better than he knew his own reflection, his anger fueled by the betrayal, his resolve hardened like stone. Every detail was crucial, every move calculated. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming his dignity, about stripping Victor of his false veneer of control and power. Marcus's lips curled into a faint, dangerous smile as he pressed his palm against the cold concrete wall, feeling its rough texture beneath his fingertips, a tactile reminder of the gritty streets he'd left behind. He could almost hear Victor's smooth, deceptive voice whispering, "You're finished, Marcus." But tonight, that voice would crack and falter. It was a matter of time before he re-entered the game, his mind already spinning plans of infiltration, disguises, distractions, the subtle art of striking where Victor's defenses were weakest. The shadows around him seemed to lean in closer, eager to witness the retribution that would soon unfold. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply, tasting the metallic tang of anticipation mixed with the bitterness of betrayal. When he opened them again, there was a fire burning behind his gaze, sharp, relentless, unyielding. Victor's reign of lies had ended. The darkness inside him, fed by loss and broken promises, had become a living thing, and he was finally ready to unleash it. "You think I've forgotten?" he whispered fiercely. "You think I've moved on? But I've been waiting in the shadows, patient and cold, for the perfect moment to make you pay. And that moment is coming faster than you realize. Every word, every thought fueled a burgeoning storm. The storm that would tear through Victor's illusion of control and leave him toothless, just as he had left Marcus vulnerable and betrayed. Marcus knew that once this was over, nothing would ever be the same. His mind darkened with purpose, a vision of a man unrecognizable, but finally free from the chains of past betrayals. A man who would take back what was stolen with fists and fury, leaving Victor broken, helpless, and silent, without teeth to hide behind his lies. Smiling with grim satisfaction, Marcus whispered one final vow into the cold air. This isn't just revenge. It's justice, finally served. From the cold shadows of my cell, I kept my eyes glued to the rhythmic patterns of Victor's routines, every move etched into my mind with brutal clarity. He was predictable. So much so it felt like watching a puppet dance on strings he himself pulled. Every morning at dawn, he'd shuffle past the guarded gates, his tailored suit crisp and unruffled, heading to a sleek high-rise apartment that reeked of money and power. I had learned to read the subtle shifts in his gait, how his shoulders tightened when he thought no one was watching, how his eyes flicked nervously when he glimpsed the security cameras. I knew when he'd be home, what he'd do, and most importantly, where he'd be vulnerable. When he returned from his so-called business, he'd step inside that pristine penthouse, a glass of whiskey in hand, the blinds drawn tight, shielding his secrets from the world. I followed him, day after day, in my mind, noting the tiny routine, how he'd pause before unlocking the door, glancing over his shoulder, maybe nervously clutching his phone, as if hiding something. I even overheard snippets of his fleeting conversations through the thin walls, his voice low, tense, laced with fear or maybe guilt. One evening, as he sat alone in that lavish apartment, I saw his guard slip for a second, a rare glimpse of weakness. He lit a cigarette, leaned back with a sigh, and murmured to himself, "No one's watching now." That was the moment I'd been waiting for. The crack in his armor, the window into his vulnerabilities. I meticulously documented his habits, the times he was most isolated, the places he frequented, the faces he trusted. It was all part of my silent plan to bring him down, piece by piece, until he was as helpless as he made me, until I could strike where it hurt the most, because I knew, beneath that polished veneer, Victor Reyes was fragile, more than he ever imagined, and I was ready to expose every weakness, every lie, and turn his empire of deception into my revenge. In the quiet shadows of his secluded apartment, Marcus sat cross-legged on the worn rug, a battered notebook open before him, filled with meticulous sketches and detailed notes. His eyes flicked over the layout of Victor's routines, the times he slipped away from his sleek, high-rise office, the places where he unwound with his favorite whiskey in that dimly lit lounge, even the fleeting moments when he thought himself invincible behind a wall of polished veneer. Marcus's finger traced a route on the map he'd drawn, highlighting the moment Victor always paused at the same corner cafe, the route he took home, the rare moments when he removed his veneer of confidence and revealed the cracks beneath. Trembling hands, the quick glance over his shoulder, the way he clutched his phone as if hiding secrets. A faint smirk curled Marcus's lips as he whispered to himself, "Time to turn the tide." He carefully outlined a plan. First, to ruin Victor's reputation by planting false rumors with his closest associates, subtly sowing distrust and paranoia. Next, he'd manipulate his routine, leave subtle clues that he was being watched, orchestrate small acts designed to unsettle him, like slipping a threatening note into his pocket, or switching his favorite whiskey with a cheap imitation. Every move would be calculated, crafted to erode Victor's confidence, to make him paranoid about every shadow, every whispered rumor, every suspicious glance. Marcus knew that Victor's arrogance was his greatest weakness, and he intended to exploit it fully, to make him doubt everyone around him, including himself. The plan was not merely about revenge, but about psychological warfare, dismantling the man piece by piece until he was trembling in his high-rise, desperate for answers, for escape. Marcus set the notebook aside, his eyes dark with purpose. "Soon, you'll wish you never crossed me," he muttered, voice low and cold. His fingers tapped a steady rhythm on the table, each beat echoing his resolve, his mind already racing through the steps, each move designed to destabilize Victor from the inside out. Every detail, every trap, every lie would be carefully laid, ensuring that the moment of final reckoning would strike hard, leaving Victor broken and helpless, just as he had left Marcus all those months ago. The city's distant hum outside seemed to fade as Marcus focused entirely on this delicate, deadly chess game, knowing that once he pulled the trigger on his plan, there was no turning back. His breath steadied, a slow smirk curling at the corner of his mouth, as he prepared to weave chaos into Victor's carefully crafted world, one calculated move at a time. With my body battered but my mind sharper than ever, I slipped silently through the shadowed alleyways, each step deliberate and measured, my senses heightened to every rustle, every distant shout that might betray my presence. The prison gates had been a cage I shattered with brute will and cunning, leaving behind the suffocating walls that once confined my rage and regret. Now I moved through the city's underbelly like a ghost, a predator reclaiming what was stolen, daring to confront the traitor who thought himself untouchable. Victor was careless, too comfortable in his polished life, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface. I watched him from the darkness's edge, a smirk curling on my lips as I observed him laugh into his phone in a dimly lit bar, oblivious to the predator circling. "You think you're safe, don't you?" I muttered under my breath, voice almost lost amidst the distant sirens and street noise. My fingers tightened around the cold steel of a razor-sharp blade hidden beneath my coat, a symbol of my transformation from victim to avenger. I knew his routines, the late-night visits to his mansion, the security blind spots, the moments he let his guard slip when he believed himself invincible. I had studied his every move, weaving myself into the fabric of his world without detection. The adrenaline surged as I prepared mentally for the inevitable confrontation. This was no longer about the package or the betrayal. It was about justice, about reclaiming my dignity from the depths of betrayal's abyss. I whispered, "Soon, Victor. You'll wish you'd never crossed me," feeling the weight of my vengeance settle like a storm cloud over my soul. Every nerve in my body hummed with anticipation as I stepped into the shadows, ready to strike at the heart of his false security. The city's chaos around me melted into a silent cocoon of purpose. My purpose. To make him pay in ways he'd never imagined. To strip him of his power, just as he had tried to strip mine. No more hiding, no more waiting. I was coming for him, and this time I would leave him broken, toothless, and trembling in the darkness he thought he controlled. In the faint glow of dawn, I slipped through the city streets like a shadow, my eyes fixed on the small, upscale cafe where Victor often started his mornings. I had been watching him for days, blending into the background, a ghost amidst the bustling crowd of affluent patrons and hurried baristas. Today he sat alone at a corner table, meticulously sipping his black coffee, as if the world's chaos hadn't touched him. Yet behind that calm facade, I sensed the tension, the nervous flicker in his eyes. His jaw clenched as he glanced over his shoulder, a habit I'd come to recognize, searching for threats in the small, suspicious glances he threw at the doorway. His security was tight, 2 burly guards flanking him, their eyes constantly scanning the street, hands resting casually near their belts. I watched from across the street, concealed behind a cluster of parked cars, my breathing steady but my pulse pounding. I noted the way Victor's fingers drummed on the table, a subtle tell of his unease, even amidst his seemingly composed exterior. His voice when he spoke to the barista was clipped, precise. "Make it quick. I've got a lot on my mind." The guards responded with curt nods, their eyes darting from the street to their boss with practiced vigilance. I pulled out my phone, zooming in on his face, memorizing every line, every micro-expression. This was the man who had betrayed me, the man whose trust I was about to dismantle brick by brick. I had learned his routines, the way he lingered at that cafe, the times he checked his phone, the moments he was most vulnerable, those tiny cracks in his armor that I'd exploit. As Victor took another sip, he leaned back slightly, eyes closing for a brief moment, a sign of false confidence. I smirked softly, knowing that this was the calm before the storm. Today I would not just observe. I would strike at the heart of his fragile sense of security. The city around us thrummed with life, unaware of the silent storm brewing on its quiet streets. Soon, Victor's carefully constructed world would shatter, and I would remind him that no fortress, no matter how luxurious or guarded, could protect him from the reckoning he had invited. I tightened my grip on the cold metal of my concealed weapon, feeling the promise of vengeance pulse through my veins. A promise that this day would end with him trembling, toothless in the darkness he thought he controlled. Under the pale glow of the street lamp, I moved like a shadow slipping through the cracks of Victor's carefully curated world. Disguised behind a calm exterior, I blended into the background, always watching, always listening. Tonight I was planting seeds of doubt in his mind, whispering rumors that would twist his perception of trust. I knew his routines, how he checked his phone at the same time each day, how he lingered at the same upscale cafe, his guarded expression hiding insecurities I had uncovered. Approaching the corner nearby, I casually lit a cigarette, exhaling slowly as I watched him from a distance. He was inside, laughing with a new acquaintance, unaware of the subtle menace lurking in the shadows. Quietly, I pulled out my phone, typing a message that read, "He's not as loyal as he seems. Be careful." I sent it to an anonymous number, knowing it would spread rumors of Victor's supposed treachery, just enough to gnaw at his confidence. Over the next days, I continued to weave whispers into the underground channels, fueling paranoia. I watched as he grew increasingly paranoid, his eyes darting at every shadow, questioning every handshake, converting harmless interactions into potential threats. I'd leave behind a subtle trace, an empty coffee cup with a suspiciously placed fingerprint, a misplaced personal item, a whisper in a mutual friend's ear suggesting betrayal, all designed to destabilize him from within. When Victor's reputation began to fracture, I knew I had succeeded. One evening I approached him in a crowded bar, cautiously, voice low and steady. "You know, Victor, trust is a fragile thing. Sometimes the ones closest to us are the ones who cut deepest." His eyes darted to mine, a flicker of suspicion crossing his face, but he masked it quickly with a forced smile. "What are you implying?" he asked, voice tight. I shrugged, pretending indifference. "Just observing how your new friends seem a little too eager to see you fall. Be careful who you trust. They might be waiting for the right moment to turn on you." As I turned to leave, I saw the flicker of unease in his expression. His jaw clenched tighter, his posture tense. I had planted the seed of paranoia. I had manipulated his perception, making him see enemies where none existed. Every step I took away, I felt the thrill of control, knowing that Victor's fortress was crumbling from the inside out, and soon enough he would look to me for answers. Answers I was ready to give, in due time when he was most vulnerable. The city's darkness cloaked my actions, but inside I felt a strange calm, a certainty that I'd finally begun dismantling the man who betrayed me, piece by piece, whisper by whisper, until there was nothing left but the truth of his insecurities and my vengeance. Under the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, I found myself face to face with Marco, a shadow from my past I hadn't seen in years but never fully let go of. We sat on the cracked concrete of an abandoned lot, the air thick with the scent of damp concrete and stale smoke. Marco's eyes darted nervously, glinting with a mixture of familiarity and fear. He gestured toward a battered backpack tucked between his legs, voice low and edged with desperation. "You know Victor's got a stash, right? Hidden behind the drywall in his garage," he whispered, voice trembling. "He's been hoarding cash, Enough to buy a new life if he could just keep it safe. But he's scared, Blaze. I saw him pacing, checking every corner, clutching that bag like it's the only thing keeping him afloat. I swear, Victor's trembling more than he lets on. I've never seen him so vulnerable. I leaned in, eyes narrowing. And the money? How much are we talking? Marco hesitated, glancing around nervously as if the shadows might be listening. Enough to make him think twice about crossing you again. 10 grand, maybe more, hidden in a false compartment. He's been paranoid, especially after the package got him caught up with the cops. That's why he's jittery. He's afraid someone's coming for it, or worse. He's about to lose everything. I reached out and grabbed Marco's sleeve, feeling the rough calluses, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on us. Good, I said quietly, voice steely. That's exactly what I needed to know. Victor's always been a coward, hiding behind his money. And now, I've got a way to make him squirm. We're going to use that stash, tear him apart from the inside, piece by piece. And once I've got what I need, he'll wish he'd never turned on me. Trust me, Marco, this isn't just about revenge anymore. It's about making sure he understands who holds the real power. Marco nodded hesitantly, a flicker of relief crossing his face, before the shadows of doubt reclaimed his expression. I stood, feeling the weight of my plan solidify within me, knowing that the moment I found that hidden cash, Victor's world would come crashing down, just like he'd shattered mine. The night grew colder as I slipped my hands into my pockets, the promise of retribution burning hotter than the streetlights above, ready to ignite the final act of this dark game. Under the dim glow of a flickering street lamp, I watched Victor's sleek, polished office from the shadows, my heart pounding with a mixture of calculated patience and simmering rage. The first move was subtle, almost invisible, planting a flickering USB drive in his private laptop, containing forged emails that painted him as a corrupt, duplicitous dealer in the eyes of his associates. Victor, ever the smooth operator, had been ranting earlier about trust and loyalty, but I knew better. The cracks had already started to show. That night I sent him a text, a simple message laced with false concern. Victor, I saw the cops cruising near your place. Be careful, man. His reply came quick, trembling with suspicion. Who's betraying me? The next morning I leaked fake evidence to a contact within his company. A doctored business proposal showing his fingerprints on illicit transactions, subtly smudged but unmistakably incriminating. Watching him on the security footage, I saw his face drain of color as he was handed a slip with the false report. He hesitated, then threw his head back and cursed under his breath, clutching his desk for support. I had already sabotaged his deals weeks ago, whispering false rumors into the ears of his clients, making them second-guess everything. Now, I watched him spiral into paranoia, his sleek veneer cracking under the weight of fabricated betrayals. The subtle games intensified, destroying his reputation bit by bit. I set a trap, slipping a fake contract into his inbox, one that would trigger a chain of disastrous decisions. In the dead silence of the night, I heard his frantic call to his lawyer, voice thick with panic, asking if the rumors were true. I knew I had him cornered. He was losing grip on his empire, and with each passing moment his paranoia deepened. His world was unraveling before my eyes, a perfect storm of suspicion and fear. That's the beauty of psychological warfare. I didn't need to lift a finger in violence. The poison of doubt was doing all the heavy lifting. Watching him stumble, I clenched my fists, knowing that soon he'd be so consumed by his own unraveling mind that he wouldn't see what was coming, until it was too late. The game was escalating, and Victor's empire of lies and deceit was crumbling beneath the weight of my silent, relentless assault. The decrepit warehouse lay cloaked in shadows, its rusted beams and peeling paint whispering secrets of abandonment as I stepped inside, every footfall echoing in the stale silence. The air hung thick with the scent of dust, spilled oil, and something else, a faint metallic tang that made my stomach churn. I moved cautiously, senses heightened, until I found him slumped against a crumbling wall, his face a mask of nervous sweat and fake calm. Victor's eyes flicked over me, a thin smile flickering as he pushed himself upright, voice smooth but trembling just beneath the surface. "Marcus, listen, I didn't mean for things to get this messy. We all make mistakes, you know that." His hands twitched like trapped animals as he tried to mask his fear, voice dripping with false remorse. I didn't buy it. I clenched my fists, the rough material of my jacket cracking beneath my grip as I stepped closer, the space between us thick with tension. My voice, hoarse with suppressed rage, rasped, "Don't give me that bullshit, Victor! You handed me over for a fucking drug package. You sold me out. Didn't even bother to hide it. So what, you think a few empty apologies will make this right?" His eyes darted away for a split second, trying to gauge my mood. But I knew he was pretending to remain composed, his mind racing for a way out. I grabbed a shattered pipe from the corner, my knuckles tight as I pressed it against his trembling chin, forcing him to look into my eyes. "You thought you could just play both sides, huh? Pretend to be my friend while secretly selling me down the river?" His lips parted, but no words came out. Just a weak, pleading smile that didn't reach his eyes. I could see the flicker of panic in his gaze, the realization that his carefully crafted facade was crumbling. I tilted my head, the sharp metal edge digging into his jaw, a reminder of what I was capable of. "You're a coward, Victor," I hissed, voice low and dangerous. "That's why you're still breathing, because I'm not a monster. Yet. But if I wanted to, I'd tear you apart, leave you as toothless and helpless as the day you sold me out." I watched the color drain from his face as he swallowed hard, desperation creeping into his voice. "Listen, Marcus, I was just trying to survive. I didn't mean for it to go this far. We can work something out." His words trailed off into the thick silence, a feeble attempt at manipulation that only fueled my fury. I leaned in closer, my breath cold against his cheek. "You had your chance to make this right, Victor. Now, I'm the one holding the power, and I'm about to remind you what happens when you cross me." With a swift, brutal motion, I drove my fist into his jaw, feeling the satisfying crack of bone as he crumpled forward, gasping, hands clutching at his face. Blood trickled between his fingers, a trembling mess of flesh and broken teeth. I grabbed his collar, yanking him upright so he could see the cold promise in my eyes. "This is just the beginning," I whispered, voice steady now, thick with venom. "You want apologies? You want to talk your way out of this? Too late. I'm here to make sure you pay. Dearly. And when I'm finished, you won't have a single tooth left to hide behind." His eyes widened, the terror unmistakable, as I watched him realize that the only thing worse than betrayal was the price he was about to pay. One that would leave him utterly toothless, stripped of his false bravado, and silenced forever. The moment came as a brutal, primal blur. Marcus's fists clenched tightly around Victor's trembling jaw, his knuckles slick with sweat and crimson streaks of blood from earlier injuries. The dim light flickered overhead, casting shifting shadows across the narrow room, heightening the sense of claustrophobic menace. Victor's eyes darted wildly, fear spiraling into panic as Marcus's grip tightened, voice low and trembling, with suppressed fury. "You thought you could sell me out, huh? Play me for a fool!" Marcus spat, his breath ragged but his tone razor-sharp. "You thought I'd just roll over and take it." Without hesitation, he shoved Victor's head back against the wall, the sickening crunch of bone echoing like a gunshot in the confined space. Victor's lips parted in a silent scream as pain radiated through his face, blood spilling over his chin, dribbling down his neck. Marcus's face was inches from his, eyes blazing with a mixture of betrayal and molten rage. "You're about to learn what happens when you cross a man who's already lost everything," he hissed, voice raw with a dark promise. Then, in one savage, unforgiving motion, Marcus grabbed Victor's mouth, clenching his jaw, forcing him to gape wide, before yanking his head by the hair. With a brutal primal force, Marcus's hand crashed into Victor's mouth again and again, each strike tearing through flesh, ripping out teeth with a sickening crunch. Blood spatters against the wall, coating Marcus's knuckles and dribbling down Victor's chin like a grotesque, bloody sculpture. Victor's screams were muffled, replaced by frantic, desperate gurgles, as Marcus's relentless assault stripped away his ability to speak, to hide behind his false charm. This act of savage retribution was not just about pain. It was symbolic. The caging of Victor's voice, the complete eradication of his power, leaving him helpless, toothless, and broken. Marcus's chest heaved, sweat mingling with blood and saliva, eyes dark and hollow. He had crossed a line from which there was no return, etching into Victor's broken face a permanent reminder that betrayal carried a price far worse than mere punishment. As silence fell, punctuated only by Victor's shallow, bloodied breaths, Marcus stepped back, eyes still burning, knowing that this act, this brutal removal of teeth, had forever altered both their destinies, transforming betrayal into a permanent scar carved into flesh and soul. Victor lay helpless on the cold, gritty floor, trembling beneath Marcus's towering frame, blood pooling around his broken mouth where teeth once gleamed. Now, only jagged gums and shattered bone remained. His eyes fluttered open and shut, frantic with terror, as the seeping crimson painted his face and stained the cracked concrete beneath him. His hands trembled, clutching at the bloodied remnants of what used to be his smile. But words, his voice, were forever silenced, stolen by the savage act of removal that Marcus had carried out with primal fury. "You promised, Victor," Marcus growled, voice low and guttural, each word dripping with the weight of betrayal and rage. "You played me for a fool, sold me out like I was nothing. That package was your ticket to safety. But you forgot one thing. I don't forget. I don't forgive." His eyes burned with hollow emptiness, a reflection of the chaos that had overtaken him in that moment, as he pressed his palm against Victor's blood-slick face, feeling the warmth of life fading amidst the cold brutality of his deed. Marcus's breath came heavy and ragged, sweat mingling with blood, his fists clenched tightly, so tight that his knuckles turned white, before he finally stepped back, the echo of his heavy boots punctuating the deathly silence that hung between them. Victor's shallow, wheezing breaths were the only sound now, a grotesque symphony of helplessness and surrender. Marcus lingered, eyes fixed on the bloodied, broken face of his betrayer, realizing that this act had irrevocably marked him. No longer just avenging, but destroying a piece of his own humanity with every savage strike. The weight of what he'd done pressed down like an unyielding wall. He had crossed a line from which there was no return, carving into Victor's mutilated visage a permanent, visceral reminder that treachery's price was paid in the currency of blood, silence, and shattered dignity. As the silence stretched, Marcus finally turned away, leaving Victor trembling amidst the pools of crimson, knowing deep down that this moment had transformed both their fates forever. One broken, voiceless, and forever scarred, the other haunted by the ghost of his own wrath. Marcus stared down at Victor's bloodied, toothless face, the grotesque aftermath of his savage vengeance. The dim, flickering light cast shadows that twisted the broken, gaping hole where teeth had once been, a stark symbol of his brutal act. His hands trembled slightly, the adrenaline ebbing into a heavy, suffocating guilt that clawed at his chest. "Did I really do this to him?" he whispered, voice catching on the weight of what he'd just unleashed. The cold air around them seemed to thicken with silence, broken only by Victor's faint, ragged breaths that rasped like desperate pleas from a man who now had nothing left. No voice, no power, only the hollow cavity that mocked his treachery. Marcus's eyes flicked to the trembling, blood-streaked face, feeling a sick twist of remorse worming through his hardened resolve. "Was this justice?" he muttered, voice hollow as a grave, as if he was speaking to himself from across the abyss. His fists unclenched slowly, fingertips brushing the rough stubble of Victor's scalp, then falling away as if the act had drained him of strength. A rush of images flooded his mind. Trust betrayed in a glance, secrets whispered in the dark, the cold, calculated moment Victor handed him over like a pawn. To the police, all to save his own skin. Now, standing over the defeated man, Marcus wondered if this act had truly restored his dignity, or simply buried any last shred of his humanity beneath a mountain of blood and silence. His gaze lingered on Victor's helpless face, a reflection of every betrayal that had brought him here. "You thought you could leave me broken," Marcus said softly, voice trembling. "But I broke you instead. I took away what mattered most. Your voice, your smile, your teeth." He felt a strange, hollow relief, mingled with a gnawing emptiness. An understanding that revenge had exacted its terrible toll, leaving scars deeper than any physical wound. As he turned away, the weight of his actions settled heavily in his bones, a crushing sense of loss that no amount of bloodshed could undo. He knew, in the deepest corner of his soul, that this act, brutal, unforgiving, had only blurred the line between justice and monstrosity, and that in seeking to restore his dignity, he might have irrevocably destroyed whatever was left of his own soul. The weight of what I had done pressed down on me like a thick fog, crawling through every fiber of my being as I stood in that dim, abandoned warehouse, shadows flickering across cracked concrete walls. The faint hum of distant sirens grew louder, echoing through the night like a heartbeat I couldn't silence. An ominous reminder that my time was running out. I could feel the heavy steel of cuffs waiting just beyond the shadows. Or worse, the cold silence of silence, swallowed by the darkness I had willingly entered. Victor's broken face haunted me still, his mouth a gaping wound, silent, helpless, mirroring the depths of what I'd stripped from him, what I'd become. I clenched my fists until my knuckles whitened, every muscle trembling with the aftermath of brutality. "You thought you could betray me and walk away clean," I whispered bitterly, voice ragged with exhaustion and rage. "But I made sure you lost more than just your voice. I made sure you lost your dignity, your teeth, everything that kept you human." My eyes flicked to the door, shadows stretching like claws, as if they conspired to pull me back into the darkness I'd just emerged from. The sirens blared louder, metal on metal clanking as law enforcement descended on the scene, their voices cutting through the night like a blade. I knew I had seconds, perhaps less, to make a choice. Run and vanish into the labyrinth of alleyways, cloaked once again in the anonymity of shadows. Fight and face the relentless grip of the law with all its cold, unyielding authority. Or stand my ground, confront the inevitable, and accept that the man I'd become was now intertwined with the ghosts of my past. My breath hitched as I stared at Victor's broken form one last time, a hollow echo of the man I used to be, before blood and betrayal had carved their scars deep into my soul. Whispers of regret stirred beneath the fury, but logic was drowned out by primal instinct. With a slow, deliberate step forward, I felt the cold steel of my resolve solidify. No matter what came next, justice, punishment, or oblivion, I would face it head on. My mind flickered with the ghosts of every betrayal, every lost piece of innocence, and I knew this choice would define whether I slipped further into darkness or clawed my way back from the abyss. This was the end of the line, the final act of a life twisted by violence and vengeance, and I was prepared to meet the consequences, whatever they may be, with clenched teeth and a heart pounding with ruthless resolve. Standing alone amidst the suffocating silence of my dimly lit apartment, I stumbled toward the cracked mirror that hangs crooked on the wall, its glass fogged with the sweat and tears of my relentless pursuit of vengeance. My reflection stares back, haunted, scarred, yet strangely blank, an fractured mirror of the man I once was, and the beast I've become. I see the hollow eyes, shadowed with regret and fury, and the clenched jaw that refuses to release the bitter taste of bloodshed. I reach out, fingertips trembling as they brush the cold surface, and whisper, "Is this really me? Is this who I've always been? Or who I've become?" My voice cracks in the stillness, echoing in a chamber of broken promises and shattered morals. I see Victor's battered face, the toothless nightmare I left him with, an unspoken symbol of my descent, his pleading eyes frozen in my mind's eye, a vivid reminder of how deep I've fallen. I remember his trembling voice begging, "Please, man, I didn't mean for it to go this far." But in that moment, mercy was a ghost long lost in the shadows of my rage. I turn away from the mirror, sweat slick on my brow, as I grip the cool edge of the countertop, voice low but resolute. Can I ever reclaim what's left of my humanity? Or is this the new me, the predator that feeds on the ghosts of my past? The reflection remains, a fractured testament to a soul torn between remorse and unforgiving justice. With a heavy breath, I step back into the darkness, knowing that the man I see is a mirror of a world I've irrevocably transformed, caught between the monster I've created and the fragment of conscience I desperately cling to. Whether redemption is still within reach or merely another illusion, I must face myself and accept that sometimes the greatest punishment is living with what I've become. The night swallowed me whole as I melted into the cold, unforgiving shadows of the city, my silhouette dissolving into a ghostly presence among flickering streetlights and abandoned alleyways. Every step felt weighted with the blood and sweat of what I had done. Yet a strange sense of quiet clarity settled in. Perhaps this was the only way to navigate the wreckage I'd crafted. I paused beneath a peeling lamppost, my breath shallow, eyes flickering over the battered face in the cracked mirror of a broken window. Victor's face haunted me, shattered, toothless, helpless, an image forever etched in my mind. "You thought betrayal was free," I whispered aloud, voice rough and laced with exhaustion. "I made sure you paid the price." But beneath the storm of revenge, a fragile flicker of doubt flickered. Was this truly justice, or merely my own self-destruction, wearing a mask of righteousness? I reached into my pocket, fingers trembling, clutching the small vial of pills I'd kept hidden. An escape route, perhaps, or a final act of penance. The city's hum was distant but persistent, whispering promises of oblivion. I hesitated, torn between the cold comfort of surrender and the haunting echo of my conscience. "Maybe it's over," I muttered, voice cracking. Maybe I've crossed the line so far that there's no turning back. And with that, I sank onto the cracked pavement, the darkness wrapping around me like an old, familiar shroud, knowing full well that the shadows felt safer than the fractured man I'd become. As I closed my eyes, I wondered if redemption still lurked somewhere, hidden beneath layers of dirt and blood, or if I'd simply become another ghost wandering these empty streets, carrying the weight of my brutal revenge into a future that promised only silence and regret.